بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. ونشهد أن سيدنا حبيبنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا. أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters, in a very nice story narrated in one of the books called Talbis of Iblis, the Whispers of Iblis, or the Works of Iblis, a story, not a hadith, is narrated according to the following. Somebody once met Shaitan and saw him carrying 3 vessels, 3 containers, and asked, what are you carrying in these 3 containers, 3 vessels? So Shaitan said, the devil, he said, container number 1 contains oppression, dhulm. Container number 2 contains jealousy. And container number 3 contains miserliness. So he was asked, why do you have these 3 containers? He said, these are commodities that I sell. The first container, full of oppression, dhulm, as I said. The main customers are the rulers, people of authority and power. They take from me oppression, and they use oppression against the people that they rule over. And it gives me great pleasure to see misery on this earth inflicted on people, and people suffer. It gives me great pleasure to see that those who perpetrate oppression feel invincible, and those who become victims of oppression often become hopeless, and in some cases godless. Those who think they're invincible, the oppressors, they are a deluded bunch. And those who become godless are a hopeless bunch. I feel, he says, pain for those people who suffer injustices and oppression on a daily basis. And I feel very afraid of those people who perpetrate injustices and oppression. For my fate was sealed by Allah for disobeying Him once. What would be the fate of the oppressors on the Day of Judgment? For they disobey Allah every day. My brothers and sisters, a very apt reminder when I was reading it this morning. I'll tell you why. Yesterday, you saw the attack in France, in Nice. More than 85 people have been mowed down and killed. A complete monster, human looking, but a monster, nothing else, decided to drive into a crowd of people who were celebrating their national day. No person with sanity, humanity, or any understanding of compassion would ever find any justification for doing anything like this. Of course, those who have lost their lives, they include people of faith and no faith. They include Muslims, Christians, Jewish, and people of other faith and no faith. Any life lost in that tragedy is a tragedy for the rest of us. In fact, that attack, we should feel an attack against all of us. But when we feel attacks on this earth, And our grievances about attacks are not selective. When people are attacked in Syria by the butchers of Syria, Hafiz al-Assad and all the rest of them, Bashar al-Assad, sorry, the son, or the Russian government, we feel aggrieved by that as much as we feel aggrieved by the loss of life in Nice. We feel aggrieved by the loss of life in Istanbul as much as we feel aggrieved by the loss of life in France or in Brussels or in the streets of London or New York or any other parts of the world. Any oppression is wrong. And we know one of the most hateful things in the eyes of Allah is oppression. This is oppression. This is injustice. And nobody would condone such a behavior. We should be very categorical, and we should know that we as Muslims, under no circumstances, would ever condone such criminality, such barbarity, and such monstrosity. But it is very sad and shameful of the President of France to immediately call it an Islamic terrorist attack. Why would you call an attack an Islamist terrorist attack? Actually, he said Islamic terrorist attack, whatever that means. It's such an oxymoron as a statement. Terrorism is haram in Islam. How can terrorism be Islamic? And how can you use those terms together? It's like saying kosher pig. You can't say that. Pigs cannot be kosher. You cannot have this abuse of terminology and by association maligning an entire population of Muslims of 1.8 billion around the world. That callous and deliberate attempt to malign Islam doesn't win anyone hearts and minds of anybody. So one begins to find oneself rather stuck between a rock and a hard place. We condemn terrorism, of course. We condemn barbarity and cruelty. But at the same breath, at the time of great tragedy for people of France, we have to also condemn the French president for using such callous terminology, irresponsible terminology. What it does is it opens up a floodgate for attack. In reprisal, because narrow-minded bigots take those words as signals of legitimizing their own grievances against their perceived threats from their Muslim neighbors and fellow citizens. We should not do that. Brothers and sisters, in Islam, after saying that, oppression of all types and nature is not allowed. Allah forbids oppression. He forbids oppression on Himself. He says in a Hadith Qudsi that I have forbidden oppression for myself. And I have written down for me nothing but mercy and compassion and justice. We need to unpack the injustices that are prevalent today in the world, not just in France or in Syria, but all over. There is an endemic injustice. There is a floodgate of injustice happening in every corner of the world. Somebody wrote yesterday, I think, what's that guy who does one of the TV programs, Jeremy Clarkson, I think, one of his tweets or his Facebook message I was reading this morning. He said, when Afghanistan was under the Taliban and Talibans were terrorizing the Afghans, American and British government acted immediately and invaded the country. When Saddam Hussein was brutalizing its own people, American and British government was swift in attacking Iraq twice. But what about the Palestinians who have been suffering for the last 65 years by the extreme lunacy of the State of Israel and its military and its intelligence. Nobody talks about freeing the Palestinians from this barbaric, inhuman, human rights deriding, daily humiliation at the hands of the Israeli successive governments. Why? Isn't that injustice too? Of course it is injustice. But there is no interest in doing anything about Palestine and Israel. In fact, for the world, it probably is against the world's interest, whatever that is. And yet, my brothers and sisters, in Islam, our basis for justice isn't self-interest. Our basis for justice isn't what makes me feel powerful, more resourceful, rich, and affluent. No, it is the collective interest of the humanity that we must keep in mind, and therefore justice becomes imperative in everything that we do as Muslims. Imperative in every aspect of our life. So we condemn oppression. We condemn injustice of all kinds. But injustice is for as long as it prevails. Unfortunately, we will never be able to win terrorism or win over extremism or lunacy. There's not a justification for any of those things. But we are intelligent people. We're intelligent people. We look at root causes for every problem. And when it comes to extremism and terrorism, the world wants to deny the root causes. And the root causes lies in injustices that we see around the world. Yesterday, one expert said something very Islamic. An American security expert. He said something very interesting. He said, we have been bombing Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, Afghanistan in our desire to fight terrorism. In the most obnoxious war that humanity has ever heard, war against terror. And yet the world is under the grips of more terrorists today than it was when it began some 15 years ago. So we've failed miserably in defeating terrorism. For bombing cannot defeat terrorism. For bombing destroys innocent people and kills people. France and Britain and America and other allies have been bombing the Daesh targets in Syria. In the bombing, they call it precision bombing. Apparently they find one Daesh soldier and they bomb an area and they kill thousands of innocent civilians. The collateral damage is not important. And then they say that Daesh leader has been killed, only to be found alive and kicking in another part, causing the same havoc, death and destruction. In that process, we have eliminated the lives of 1,000 innocent people. How does that win the battle against terrorism? How does it win you and I any brownie points? How do we become the liberators? In fact, it makes you and I the oppressors. So, Shaitan loves to sell oppression in truckload to the rulers and the powerful. And the rulers and the powerful use oppression to sustain their power. I'll give you an example. And forgive me, my brothers, if you're Egyptian and if you take this offensively. I remember when General Sisi took over power and Morsi was kicked out. And I gave a speech where many Egyptians took exception. How dare I criticize Sisi? Well, those brothers should eat their hats right now. Those who did that, they should eat their hats. You know why? Today, Amnesty International launched a report in which it said, in the last 6 months alone in Egypt, under the order of Sisi directive, more than 1,000 young people have been disappeared from the face of this earth. They have been kidnapped, abducted by the security services, and their whereabouts is not known at all. If you support such a dictator, wallahi, you have a problem waiting for you on the day of judgment. No matter which persuasion you come from, even if you hate Ikhwan al-Muslimin, you cannot support oppressors under any circumstances. 44,000 people have been locked up, all political prisoners in Egypt. 44,000 people languishing and rotting in prison by this dictator general Sisi. And the world, our government, has good business with Sisi, has complete trade relationship, gives him aid every day he needs to survive and sustain his power. For as long as you and I are buffoons, and please forgive me for using terminologies as strong as this, for as long as you and I are in delusion and don't see oppression as oppression and don't call oppressors as oppressors, you and I will not find liberation. Oppression of Egyptians wrong. Dictatorship in Egypt is wrong. But if our government, British government, and French government, and the world's government want to end terrorism, they must first stop supporting dictators and despots around the world. In Ramadan, the 27th day of Ramadan, wallahi, most of us were celebrating the 27th day of Ramadan, and yet a bunch of butchers, 6 of them, walked into a cafe in Bangladesh and killed 20 foreigners, innocent people who had done nothing wrong. Those were butchers, those were monsters. Of course, what they did was wrong. But what did the government do to protect the Bangladeshis from the daily humiliation that they suffer? Nothing. It rounded up 14,000, mark my words, it rounded up 14,000 alleged terrorist sympathizers, terrorist-linked people a week before, a month before. 14,000 terrorists, in quote-unquote, were taken off the street to make Bangladesh safe. But guess what? It seems like a worst massacre in the history of Bangladesh by any one individual in terms of terrorism took place on the 27th day of Ramadan. And those who perpetrated them never went to an Islamic school, never went to a madrasa, never joined an Islamic group in their life when they were young, were actually sons of the elite of Bangladeshi politics today. And yet, we have full business relationship with Bangladeshi government, no problem, we carry on. 14,000 people are languishing in prison, innocent people. Same tactics as the Egyptian government does. People are kidnapped and disappear. Did you know, a khutbah that I gave in this masjid after visiting Bangladesh in 2012 got me banned from Bangladesh completely. I'm not allowed to go to Bangladesh today. My parents come from Bangladesh. If I go, they'll arrest me on sight. Why? Because I spoke about what I'm just saying today. My brothers and sisters, please mark my word. I don't care who you are. Even if my father is wrong, if my father is involved in oppression and injustice, I am duty-bound to speak out against oppression and injustice. In Islam, all types of oppression is wrong. All types of oppression is wrong. Whether they're done by Muslims or non-Muslims, whether they're done by individuals, Daesh or government and state, all wrong, un-Islamic, all un-Islamic all the time. So what we're seeing today, the reason why there is proliferation of terrorism in the world, in my view, it's rooted in oppression around the world. Oppression around the world. Today I read, this morning I read, in Cameroon, thousands of young people have been arrested because they have been found association by alleged or whatever it is to be sympathizers of the group Boko Haram. With no evidence, no trial, every week 8 to 9 people, or at least 10 people die in the prison in Cameroon without any trial. Are we actually ending oppression in the world? No. You can't lock people up and think you've rid the world of extremism and terrorism. That's not how extremism and terrorism is destroyed, my brothers and sisters. And the leaders of the world should know better. Allah says that in the Quran. For if there is fitna and fasad on this earth, whenever you cause fitna and fasad on the land and in the sea, there will be turmoil on this earth. But the only way back is to establish justice and peace. And not selective justice and not selective peace, but universal justice and universal peace. And let me say this to you again and again. No philosophy, no ideology in the 21st century world, or ever before, can compete with Islam's proposal of what is justice and what is peaceful. You cannot compete with it, because Islam's proposal of justice and peace for the world is universal. It is beyond race and interest. It is beyond nationality and color. It is beyond selfishness. It is for everybody, for all times. That's why the world needs Islam more today than it has ever needed before. That is why every part of the world needs Islam more than we have seen ever before. So the ticket away and out of oppression isn't to vilify Islam. It is to accept Islam can play a major role in changing the destiny of humanity again, just like it did before. May Allah strengthen us in our iman and our abilities to be able to fight oppression, injustice, terrorism and extremism. Wa akhir da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي كفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters, what does Allah say about taking lives? And we all know this. We've heard it many times. من قتل نفس بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا. Whoever takes one life unjustly and fairly, it is as though they've taken the lives of the entire humanity. ومن أحياها, and whoever saves a life, فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا, it is as though they have saved the lives of the entire humanity. Allah says that in the Quran very clearly. Taking one life, it is like taking the lives of the entire humanity. Why would Allah say that? Which other philosophy says that? Brothers and sisters, there are 1.7 billion of us on this earth today. If Muslims were inspired by terrorism, there would be no other human beings left on this earth, logically speaking. No, Muslims are not inspired by terrorism under any circumstances. In fact, terrorism and all of this are byproduct of the warped, twisted policies of the world that we see today prevailing in every corner of the world. That needs to change. And you and I have a role to play in it. Prophet ﷺ said, if you see an evil, change that evil with your hand. If you can't change it with your hand, say against it, speak against it. And if you can't speak against it, at least detest it in your heart. وَذَلِكَ أَدْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ, and that is the lowest stage of Iman, Prophet ﷺ said. Do we do enough to stand up against the evil around the world? I don't think we do. I don't think Muslims do enough to stand against the evil around the world. I don't think Muslims speak against the evil around the world enough. I don't think we detest evil enough in our world. Because we have become passive consumers of whatever is happening around the world. We just have it. No, that's not acceptable. We're not going to do that. If we do, we'll be the ones to become the victims and the casualties. Wherever we are, whether it is in England or in Saudi Arabia, whether it is in Bangladesh or Pakistan or in Africa, we want everywhere to be peace and stability. We want everyone to be happy and free. Because Allah says that in the Quran, He has created you and I free to worship Him alone, nobody else. To be afraid of none but Allah Azza wa Jalla alone. Today, terrorists used to create terror in the hearts and minds of people. Government used terror, restraining orders, locking up people, unlawful detention, invasion and wars to terrorize people. Rich and wealthy use their wealth and muscles to be able to terrorize people, all about subjugating humanity and not freeing all of us. If you truly want to be free, as Muslims, our only freedom is possible when we return to the deen of Allah. Return to the Quran, understand the words of Allah, and follow the message of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the world a blueprint for change. A change that he showed by his own example. He transformed a warring world into a light-giving beacon for hope and enlightenment world. We need to return the world to that state again. And the only way we can do that, brothers and sisters, is by returning to the true message of Islam. And true message of Islam is summed up in one verse of the Quran, which every Imam in every Jummah khutbah recites. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي. He says, and Allah orders you to be just. He orders you to be excellent. And He orders you to be compassionate. 3 orders. And He prohibits 3. Stay away from evil, shamelessness, and stay away from rebellion. 3 orders and 3 prohibitions. Simple 3 principles on each side would transform the world if you and I can live it. If you and I can practice it. So to finish off, my brothers and sisters, you and I in Europe today, well, sorry, you're not anymore, we're Brexited, but still in the continent of Europe, have a role to play. Our role is to become ambassadors of what? Justice. Our role is to become ambassadors of excellence. Our role is to become ambassadors of kindness and compassion. And our role in the world today is to become active against evil, active against shamelessness, and active against all types of rebellion, extremism, terrorism, and all sorts of lunacy. Very simple task Allah has laid down in the Quran. We hear it every day. It's about time we began practicing it. It's about time we started sharing it with the world and exemplifying it in our behavior. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, enable us to become better people, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Akramul Akramin, strengthen us in our iman, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, relieve this world from the troubles and the towers, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, remove from this world tyranny. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, remove from this world oppression. Remove from this world extremism. Remove from this world oppression. Remove from this world all evil and shamelessness, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, make us the ambassadors of justice, Ya Allah. Make us the ambassadors of excellence, Ya Allah. Make us the ambassadors of kindness and compassion, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, remove the tyrants from this earth, Ya Allah. Free every part of the world that is ruled by tyrants, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, free our brothers and sisters in Syria, Ya Allah. Free our brothers and sisters in Egypt, Ya Allah. Free our brothers and sisters in Bangladesh, Ya Allah. In Pakistan, Ya Allah. In every part of the world that is in trouble, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, restore on this earth peace, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, restore on this earth peace, Ya Allah. Restore on this earth peace, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, give the people of the world, especially those who have suffered, patience to be able to endure their sufferings, Ya Allah. Patience to be able to endure with losses, Ya Allah. And give us all the strength, love and compassion so that we can stand with one another, Ya Allah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون والله يعلم ما تصنعون. كم الصلاة؟